disturbing crimes to stories of betrayal, these confessions went on to haunt the priests that heard them for years afterwards. Join us as we uncover the dark side of human nature and explore the traumatic experiences of those who have heard the worst of humanity's sins. Are you ready to face the darkness? Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the confession gone wrong. This is a pretty wild Reddit story that the user LegalThrowaway2206 posted in the r/legal advice thread around a year ago. They wrote, quote, "I cheated on my husband 3 years ago while traveling for work. It was a one-night stand and we didn't exchange numbers or keep in contact. I don't even know his last name. Until last month, I've never told anyone about this event. At the time I cheated, I didn't really care because my marriage was rocky and I felt unappreciated. But my husband and I reconnected during quarantine and I started to feel extremely guilty. Last month, I thought I would try going to confession with my parish priest. He said I needed to tell my husband as part of my penance. I wasn't really sure how to do that, so I've sat on it. Last weekend I came home to my husband throwing all of my stuff out of the bedroom and trying to kick me out of the house. He knows everything. Apparently the priest followed up to see if I'd told my husband, and when my husband said he didn't understand what the priest was talking about, he told my husband about the affair. My whole world is exploding because I thought confession was supposed to be private. Does the priest have any kind of liability or responsibility?" Although it appeared based on the replies that there wasn't necessarily much this person could do legally, there of course would be repercussions professionally. Definitely an awful situation brought on by a string of bad decisions. In our number 9 spot today, we have Robert Hanssen's confession. Robert Hanssen was an FBI agent who worked as a double agent for the Soviet Union and later Russia. His treachery went undetected for over 20 years until he was arrested in 2001. It was later revealed that he had confessed his early espionage activities to a priest during a retreat in 1979. Hanssen's confession was detailed and included information about how he had provided the Soviets with classified documents and information. He spoke of his motivations for spying, including his disillusionment with the FBI and his desire for money and recognition. The priest was sworn to secrecy and did not report the confession to authorities as it was protected by the seal of confession. However, it has been noted that the FBI suspected Hanssen of espionage as early as the 1980s, suggesting that the confession may not have been the sole reason for his eventual capture. Hanssen's confession to his priest highlights the complexity of the seal of confession and the ethical dilemmas that can arise when confidential information is shared during a confession. It also serves as a reminder of the potential consequences of espionage and the dangers of betraying one's country. Alright, wouldn't recommend. In our number 8 spot today, we have Father Joseph Towle. Father Joseph Towle is a Bronx priest who found himself at the center of controversy after he testified in a federal court about a killing case that he had knowledge of. Back in the late 1980s, a very troubled young man named Jesus Fornes came to him and admitted to a killing for which 2 other men, Jose Morales and Ruben Montalvo, had been convicted. Father Towle's decision to testify was criticized by some because it raised questions about the confidentiality of the confessional. Under canon law, a priest is required to go to his death if necessary before revealing what he has been told in sacramental confession. However, Father Towle maintained that Fornes' confession was not sacramental and therefore not bound by the seal of confessional. The Archdiocese also supported Father Towle's decision to testify, saying that Fornes had sought to inform the authorities himself and that Father Towle was acting in a counseling capacity rather than in a sacramental confession. Nonetheless, the case raised troubling questions about the limits of confidentiality for priests and the ethical responsibility of clergy in situations where they have knowledge of criminal activity. Ultimately, the case highlights the very complex moral and ethical dilemmas that priests can face when dealing with the confessions of their parishioners. In our number 7 spot today, we have the possession. Father Ryan listened intently as the young woman in front of him began her confession. She spoke in a very hushed voice and had an energy about her as if she feared someone was listening. Quote, "I think I'm possessed," she whispered. "I can feel something inside of me, something evil." Father Ryan's heart quickened. He had heard of stories of possession, but he had never encountered it himself. He knew that if what the woman said was true, he would need to perform an exorcism. "Tell me more," he said gently. The woman began to describe the strange things that had been happening to her, objects moving on their own, terrifying visions, and a feeling of being watched. Father Ryan listened in horror as she spoke, realizing that he was in the presence of something truly evil. evil. He knew that he had to act quickly before the demon inside the woman could cause any more harm. With a deep breath, he stood up. "Stay strong," he said. "We will get through this together." And with that, he led her out of the confessional and into the light, ready to face the darkness that lay ahead. In our number 6 spot today, we have Father Martin's story. Father Martin sat in the confessional booth one day waiting for his next penitent. It was a quiet night until he heard someone enter the other side of the booth. The man's voice was low and raspy, almost inaudible. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," he said. Father Martin began the sacrament, but as the man began to speak, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The man confessed to a heinous act of killing that he committed years ago, describing it in detail as if it were yesterday. Father Martin felt his stomach churn as he listened, feeling sickened by the man's admission. He listened intently, unsure of what to do. Should he report this to the police, or would it violate the sanctity of the confessional? His heart raced as he pondered the weight of the man's confession. When the man finished speaking, Father Martin sat in stunned silence. He knew that he had to do something, but he also knew that he couldn't reveal the identity of the penitent. In the end, he prayed for the man's forgiveness and assigned a penance that was heavy with remorse. As the man left the confessional, Father Martin felt the weight of the man's confession bear down on him. What to do when faced with such a situation? In our number 5 spot today, we have Michael Taylor. Okay, I'll be honest, this is less of a confession story and more of just a horrifying series of events, all starting with a man named Michael Taylor and his priest. The year was 1974, and Michael was a husband and father of 5 children, but was unfortunately struggling with frequent bouts of depression, which is difficult for anyone to manage. Seemingly, however, when he met a 21-year-old pastor named Marie Robinson, these bouts became less harsh and more manageable. So far, this seems like a nice little story about someone getting the help they need, but that is not the case at all. Apparently, he claimed his depression was getting better due to the pastor's ability to exorcise the demons that were plaguing him with this illness. Michael's wife is like, okay, yeah, likely story, and confronts him about what she believes is going on, which is that he is having an affair with Marie. After this confrontation, he physically attacks his wife, which then led to him getting an actual exorcism by 2 ministers on October 5th, 1974. During this, Michael had seizures, he spit and bit the ministers, and screamed in tongues. After going through all of that, you'd expect this guy to be free of whatever the heck is going on, but unfortunately, the following day he brutally took the life of his own wife. If all of this wasn't enough to make a dreadful story, he ended up not even being convicted because the defense argued that the exorcism made him insane. In our number 4 spot today, we have Father Michael. Father Michael sat behind the confessional screen, listening intently to the voice on the other side. The voice was shaky, and he could tell that the person was struggling with what they wanted to say. Finally, the voice spoke. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I have lied to my family, and it's tearing me apart." Father Michael listened as the voice explained how they had lied to their family about something very trivial, but that the lie had grown bigger and bigger, and now they couldn't bring themselves to tell the truth. Father Michael offered words of comfort and advised the penitent to speak the truth, no matter how hard it may be. As the confession ended and the penitent left the confessional, Father Michael sat in silence, reflecting on the power of truth and the burden of deceit. In our number 3 spot today, we have Father Thomas. Father Thomas listened as the woman in the confessional booth poured out her soul. She spoke of the loneliness and neglect she felt in her marriage and how it had driven her into the arms of another man. Tears streamed down her face as she begged for forgiveness, but Father Thomas struggled to offer it. His own heart ached with memories of a similar sin, a sin he had repented of but never forgotten. He took a deep breath and prayed for guidance before speaking. "My child, I cannot judge you, for I too have made mistakes in my past. But I do know that you must take responsibility for your actions and seek to make things right with your husband. You must confess to him and ask for his forgiveness, and most importantly, you must seek forgiveness from God, who is merciful and just." The woman nodded, her sobs subsiding as she accepted Father Thomas' words. As she left the booth, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It was a difficult confession to hear, but he knew that he had helped the woman take the first steps toward healing and redemption. In our number 2 spot today, we have Father Paul. Father Paul was a seasoned priest with over 30 years of experience. He had heard many confessions from minor sins to major crimes, and today was no different as he sat in the confessional box, waiting for the next person to enter. He heard footsteps approach and the door opened. A young man entered and sat down in the booth. He took a deep breath before starting to speak. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 2 weeks since my last confession," the man said in a hushed voice. "What is it that you would like to confess?" Father Paul asked, curious but calm. "I have been stealing," the man confessed, sounding ashamed. "Stealing?" Father Paul repeated. "Can you tell me more about what you have been stealing?" stealing and why. The man explained that he had been stealing from his workplace, taking small amounts of money from the cash register every day. He needed the money to support his family as they were struggling to make ends meet. Father Paul listened attentively and advised the man to confess his actions to his boss and return the money he had taken. He explained that stealing was a sin and the only way to repent was to make amends and ask for forgiveness. The man took the advice and left the confessional booth feeling relieved to have confessed his wrongdoing. Father Paul sat in the booth for a few minutes reflecting on the man's confession. He knew that everyone made mistakes, but it was important to take responsibility and make things right. As the priest closed the booth's door, he said a silent prayer for the man and hoped that he would find peace and forgiveness. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Father John. Father John sat patiently in the confessional waiting for the next person to enter. He had been hearing confessions for many years, but he never grew tired of helping people find forgiveness and peace. The door creaked open and a young man stepped inside. He introduced himself as Tom and began to speak in a hushed tone. "Father, I have sinned. I have lied to my family about losing my job, but the truth is, I've been struggling with debt. I can't bring myself to tell them the truth." Father John listened compassionately as Tom spoke, offering words of encouragement and guidance. He reminded Tom that honesty and humility were essential virtues, and that by confessing his sin, he was taking the first steps towards redemption. After Tom had finished, Father John gave him absolution and asked him to make amends with his family and seek help to manage his finances. To this day, Father John has never seen the man again and continues to wonder what happened and if he ever ended up telling his family the truth. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlovsky, and I will see you again soon. Bye! Alright. Priests. Hey, you know that priests can't say what you said in confession? So it was hard. It was hard to find these.